I think it was 2008 or something like that John McCain was saying. And he was shouting back, as many of us are wont to do, to their televisions or their radios or what have you. And he said some choice blue words and had no idea that his microphone was still on, that the operator at the other end had not shut his microphone off, and that they were going out live.
The famous 7 dirty words.
Indeed.
By George Carlin.
Indeed.
Oh, yeah. Well, let's say, but being from the early days of radio, and I call 1964 the early days of FM. Not really early, but early enough that at that time, FM stood for forget money. Many stations were
progressive rock, man.
What?
Progressive rock.
Oh, yes. Well, that was what changed it. That was one of the things that changed it. Another thing that changed it was stereo. Mm-hmm. That actually being able to reproduce good music in stereo with reasonable fidelity was pretty impressive. And not long after that came album-oriented rock, when you could play long cuts. Right. Whereas a commercial AM, because of the commercials, you really couldn't get away with a 15-minute improvisation by the Grateful Dead.
Right, exactly.
FM, you could.
Exactly. So the music gravitated towards FM and the talk gravitated towards AM.
Exactly right. And but I would say the audience is part of it too, because if you look at the rural parts of the country where the farmers are, where houses are maybe one every mile or mile and a half down the road, with hundreds of acres of fields between them, it's pretty hard to make an FM station work there because the terrain might be in the way, and on top of that, there aren't very many people in the coverage of that FM station unless you have an insanely tall tower, like a 2,000-foot tower, to put your antenna on, and that's frightfully expensive. So why would you do it? And so in large parts of the Midwest, AM is the only thing that really works in terms of reaching the people who live there and providing entertainment and news and information and so on.
I don't know if you've heard, Bob, that there are a lot of vehicles that are planning no longer to have AM radio carried in their cars.
Yes, I did hear that. Now, that actually has to do not with AM radio itself, but
the electronics in the vehicle that interfere with it.
What it's really about is that big battery in that thing that's high voltage, 400 volts or even higher.
Right.
And it's turning the DC into AC to make the wheel motors go. And the transistors are turning on and off very rapidly, generating what are called harmonics. And that jams the AM radio band, unless it's very well shielded. And in this country, Tesla, from what I understand, has never included AM. Although they are a minority in terms of the number of cars on the road, there are a lot of Teslas in some areas, but in a lot of places there aren't. There are a lot of hybrids that also have that high voltage battery and a similar noise problem. Although the ones from Japan and Korea do have good shielding, and AM radio does work in those, and they in fact use AM radio in their national system.
You wouldn't think that shielding of that kind would be prohibitively expensive. Why don't they just do that and then preserve the band?
It's just use some metal instead of plastic. That's really all it amounts to.
Yeah.
You can have a layer of plastic that keeps your fingers off the 400 volts, keeps you from getting zapped, and you can have a layer of metal that does the same thing with a little plastic around the wires. But
it doesn't seem like that would be too much to. We wouldn't burden the car excessively in terms of gas mileage. That's not a whole lot that has to be shielded there.
No, it wouldn't. No, it wouldn't. And in fact, if anything, it might be a safety issue because it's metal around the thing. So the chances of it cracking and breaking and exposing anything dangerous is pretty small.
Yeah.
So I tend to say, the proper shielding isn't that expensive. It can be done. AM radio can still survive.
Right.
And I think AM radio serves a very good purpose. Now,
I think it does, and I think the purpose that it should serve it increasingly in this age is individual communities, local communities. And at the heart of it, even though it was a tremendously successful commercial enterprise, KGO in San Francisco, KGO 810 AM, for so many years, fundamentally its success was based on its connection to the community. And you have a whole range of primarily FM community radio stations, non-commercial radio stations throughout the U.S. I think that the FM, as it's being increasingly abandoned by the technology, abandoned by advertisers, could become a very useful tool to connect our communities and forge that relationship that we once had. When I listened in the 1980s and the 1990s to shows and during natural disasters and difficult times for our country, to hear people just call in to talk radio programs and vent their fears and their frustrations and their hopes, that seemed a time when we were more connected than what we get out of the social media on the internet. And perhaps we can return to a time where we're really more closely connected that doesn't have to do with the internet, which is so strangely mediated that it guides us directly into conflict with one another in order to make money for these different platforms. What do you think?
Well, I definitely think AM has a place. I think FM, especially low power FM, also has a place. And you know, a small town, and let's pick a town of say 20,000 people.
Right.
Can support an FM station or two, and an AM station or two, probably, especially if they have coverage at night, because people work during the daytime, whatever they're doing, and then after at night they want to kick back. And not everybody wants to watch television. Some people do, but not everybody does. There are people like me who would prefer to listen to music.
Yeah.
And I don't mind a little advertising once in a while. I also don't mind a news interruption once in a while to find out what's going on. So the top of the hour news works for me. Mm-hmm. And I do like the ability to call in if they have a good host who's able to handle that, and producers that do it. And I know you were at one time you were one of those producers.
Yes, I was.
But that's you know, there's radio and television are both team efforts. It takes a team to make it happen and do it well. And in fact, I used to get some, I guess you could say, ribbing from my father-in-law that I always worked Thanksgiving Day, and so Thanksgiving afternoon I would show up around 4 p.m.
Right.
Because I worked in the morning, and it was a VHF network TV station, and what was I having to work the holiday for? And he didn't understand that all that hardware had to be working just fine, because his big screen projection TV system that he was going to watch those football games with depended on a whole bunch of regional stations, like the single-digit channel that I worked for. Yeah. And all that hardware had to be working in order for him to get what he was supposed to see, the whole game, and, by the way, the commercials to go with it.
Yeah.
And
to foot the bill.
I was there in the morning. What?
To foot the bill for the football.
Oh, yeah. Well, I had to explain to him that when he watches television, he was watching 3 professional teams, not 2.
That's right. The one behind the scenes that you never see.
2 of the teams were playing a game on a field. The third team were all those radio and TV people that made that game possible for him to watch or listen to, depending on which he preferred. Mm-hmm. And how did that happen? That isn't magic.
And that's why you were late for Thanksgiving and only got the leftovers.
That's right. That's exactly right. But I also felt, a sense of accomplishment and achievement because Thanksgiving morning is the Macy's parade, and then after that was a lineup of football games, and going home with knowing that everything is working and all the backup plans have been tested and everything, and that is working too, means that he can watch his football game and not get a thing on the screen that says technical difficulties, please stand by.
Right.
He was never going to see that because there was a plan A and a plan B, and both had been tested that very morning.
That's right, and you were
people
responsible
like me,
for it.
Yeah.
What should have happened when you came home for the meal is he should have saluted you and said, "Thank you for your service, Bob."
In a way, I would say that's true about broadcast engineers because we tend to be like the projectionists in the movie theater. Mm-hmm. You don't see us, you don't hear us, and if everything goes well, you're not even aware that we're there.
Yeah. Well, I have a friend who used to be a projectionist at a movie theater, and they don't even do that anymore. I mean, they have somebody up, controlling the different, computers and things, but there's no such thing as a projectionist in almost every place.
It's now digital storage with laser projectors and stuff, and yes, no moving parts or very few moving parts, and very reliable. So now, but there still is somebody just in case something breaks because things actually do fail over time, so they don't last forever.
Yeah,
things actually wear out. But it's possible, that one person can now keep an eye on 20 different projectors.
If it allows them to reduce the labor costs, as we've discussed so many times on this program, they're likely to do it.
I'll tell you another story. When I started in AM radio, I was a disc jockey. I started out on weekends doing what are known as voice tracks, playing other people's voice tracks.
Yeah.
But eventually, they gave me a 6 to midnight, 6 nights a week thing, and I phased my voice out right away because I figured people don't want to hear me talk. And I played sets of 3. I played an instrumental, a vocal, and another instrumental. Mm-hmm. And I rarely even gave the titles of what I was playing. I figured you don't need to know that. If you want to know that, you can call. But I almost never gave out the phone number, and because I figured people really wanted to just relax and have something pleasant, and that's what I was doing, acoustic collages, if you will. Mm-hmm. But AM radio, I won't say it died. I would say it was murdered. It's a better way to put it.
It's been murdered by the financial model in a lot of ways.
Exactly. Yeah. And I would put it back probably 1994, 95 when the rewrite of the Telecommunications Act happened.
Oh yeah. No, I remember that when that happened. It was in 1996. I was at my college radio station at UC Santa Cruz, KZSC. And I was in the middle of training for the process to actually be able to operate the station because you had to have an actual license to do that up until that point. And I trained to do it, and I learned how to do it, and I took the test, and I passed it, and then all of a sudden, you didn't need that license anymore. So I went through all the training. And I learned how to, raise the levels and lower the levels and turn off the station and turn on the station and, record all the everything that I needed to record. And then I didn't need to do it anymore because of the 96 law. And that at the same time changed the number of stations that you could own. It took the cap off the number of stations that you could own in any market and ushered in a huge era of radio syndication that hadn't existed before.
That's where part of the murder happened because when that happened, a lot of localism died.
Yeah.
If you could only own originally it was 7 AM, 7 FM, and 7 TV stations. Mm-hmm. So even big corporations couldn't own like 1,000 AM radio stations across the country. It couldn't do that. Yeah. But when a corporation, especially the likes of the hedge funds, come in and start buying up the real estate, if you will, and saying, okay, we'll just feed the same thing to everybody by satellite, so we don't need to have any local people at all. We can remote control the transmitter, turn it on, take the readings, all that from 1,000 miles away. We don't need real people anymore. And news has to pay for itself. It has to earn its way, and that was the death of.
Kind of reminds you of the movie Network, doesn't it? It's become
Yes, it does.
It's become part of the entertainment division.
That's right. That's right. Now there are things that radio and television, I think radio more than television, can do, is